Where do I begin? It was a dark and stormy night. It actually wasn't. It was December 14th, 1991, and I was in Charleston, South Carolina. I am from the South, as you can tell. Yes, I've lived in Ireland for 20 years, but you'd never lose a Southern accent. It mutates a little bit, but I'm a born and bred Southerner and will be till the day I die again. And I had just graduated from Coker College in Hartsville, South Carolina, and as we do in the South, which is a bizarre little tradition that we have, if you're dating the person that you were in college after college, then they're going to be your intended. You know, you're expected to marry this individual. And so when I was dating the same fellow when I graduated from college, you know, we followed that path of moving towards his hometown, and you know, there was talk of marriage and there was this and that going on. And I was very excited to go and get my first big girl job. And I was so excited because with my double degrees in communications and graphic design, I was a shoo-in. I had interned at ABC in Florence, South Carolina. I was right ready to go. And I knocked on many doors and no jobs. And so I ended up in a very fortuitous event where I was mopping floors in a sign company. And it was the very best thing that ever happened to me because it was kind of, you know, when we have angels unaware, we have these people who enter our lives and they are there to drop these wonderful nuggets of wisdom. Well, the man who owned this sign company changed my life forever because he put a mop in my hand, gave me a big old hug, and he said, "You learn this business from the bottom up and you'll never, ever fail." And I went, okay, so I started mopping floors, and that's what I was doing on December 14th, 1991. We were having our Christmas party. And in Charleston at Christmas time, it's hot. So I'm wearing bright red Bermuda shorts and a Santa Claus t-shirt and a lovely jingle bell lined with Swarovski crystals around my neck. And I'm on my way to this Christmas party. And I leave my apartment, and 2 miles down the road, I get to a stoplight that is at the intersection of a very large highway called Highway 17. Now, not large by LA standards, but, you know, it's 4 lanes either way, so that's big for us in the South. And I'd been sitting at this traffic light, minding my own business, listening to some rock and roll on the radio, and I'm going to go across all the lanes of traffic and head towards downtown Charleston. So I'm waiting. Finally, my light turns. And I make it across the lanes of traffic only to get to the very last lane. And I have to change to this side. I'm so used to driving on this side in Ireland and telling the story. I'm on this side. And I turn my head and I look and I see a car just barreling towards me. And in that moment, it was so surreal because everything just slowed down. Time literally stood still. You know, you hear the cliches. I became the cliche. Everything just slowed down. And suddenly I was aware in that moment that I had a choice. And I could stay in my body and experience the impact and whatever that had to offer, or I could exit my body and watch the impact. Now, here's what's really weird. I'm the daughter of a Southern Baptist minister. So the idea, number one, of sitting in this space and having a choice about anything is completely foreign to me, right? So I obviously take option B because option A is going to hurt. And in that moment, I'm very aware of this sound. Now, 20 years of living in Ireland, the way I integrated with my community was through music. Love music. I'm a musician. I've been in bands for years. And I decided I would take up a new instrument. And so the Irish drum, which is a round drum you may have seen, is called the bodhrán. And so I am a bodhrán player. And this is how I got to know my community, and through musical theater and through playing the bodhrán at these sessions. Very poorly to begin with, and mediocre now 20 minutes later. But this is how I got to know my friends. And so we have an Ilian piper. In Irish, Ilian means elbow. And so the elbow pipes are where they pipe with the bag, not the bagpipes, but the elbow pipes. And so when he's getting ready to play, he blows the air up into that bag, and it creates a drone, this sound, an unmistakable drone. And that to me is like, that is the sign of good times to come, because it means a session is getting ready to begin, and I love that sound. So now at 21 years old, I find myself looking left at a car coming towards me, and I hear this sound. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. What is that? So many years later, I have come to understand that that frequency is the frequency that kept me connected to the earth plane because it changed drastically when I exited. So I'm sitting there, I'm surrounded by that bagpipe drone, and I'm now making a choice as to whether I'm going to stay in my body or I'm going to leave. And I'm going to leave because, like I said, it's going to hurt. So the next thing, in a flash, I'm looking down and I am watching as everything speeds back up again. And I see an 81-year-old man run through the red light, T-bone my car. My car folds in half and it starts spinning through the intersection. And I'm like, where's the popcorn? I'm, I'm watching. And what was so interesting is I was completely detached. I was aware of the fact that I had just lived 21 years as Mary Helen Hensley in that body. There wasn't a sense, I can't even tell you, oh, I was so grateful for the experience. We weren't doing any of that. This was just an observation time. And I'm looking at that body. And the best way in all of my years that I've been able to describe the experience to people is if any of you are gardeners and you like getting out and getting dirty in the garden and in the hot and sweaty sunshine, and then you finish what you're doing and you come inside and you peel those dirty clothes off and you leave them next to the washing machine and you go to wherever your shower is and you have this glorious and wonderful shower. The last thing you're thinking about is the clothing. And this is what it felt like. It's the best description I can give you. I am looking at that body with, I can't even say any interest at all. I'm just like, oh, there it is. And what's interesting is that that body is now spinning through this intersection. And I'm pinned, I look like a little puppet because the seatbelt has me trapped. The door has caved in and my whole body has folded in half. My head has gone through the window and it has come back in. And luckily for me, because I had to come back into this bod, the window blew out. Because if my head had gone out and it had stayed and I'd come back in, I would have, of course, torn myself to shreds and not made it here. So the window blows out. All of the windows blow out. The car is spinning around. Can you imagine? Won't this be a great movie scene? Aerosmith's on the radio. The jingle bell is slowly banging off my chest. Listen, I've written this thing many times in my head. The visuals are going to be incredible. But that's exactly what it was like. You've got that music blaring and the bell is bouncing and I'm spinning around and I'm watching all of this. And I'm like, And I remember in that moment going, oh, I'm still me. Because after having a lifetime of very unusual paranormal experiences, you would think that this wouldn't have been an issue for me. But I'm a human being, just like you, sometimes. And always lurking in the back of my mind was, what if I cease to exist? What if this is it? What if that everything that I've been told, none of that's real? What if I live my life and that's the end of me? And even though I had communicated from the time I was born with people who were out of body, it still always crossed my mind. It was really a worry at certain points during my childhood. And so now here I sit and I'm hovering above going, I know who I am. This is great. And I'm very aware of what's taking place now because, as I said, everything has sped up. And now people are beginning to gather because I'm the spectacle. The car is smashed to bits and I could feel anguish on some people's end of having just witnessed the accident. There were a whole lot of people who were really pissed off because now the traffic was closed. And oddly enough, a girl I had gone to college with had been 3 cars behind me at the stoplight. Now, Charleston's a big city, 350,000 people. And our college where we went isn't in Charleston. She was from Charleston and just happened to be there. And I got to feel her recognizing that that was my car. And it was the most interesting thing because I could feel what she was feeling. I wasn't judging it. I wasn't upset by it, but I was just aware of what she was able to feel in that moment. It was quite unusual. So I look down again and a woman rushes up to the car. She places her phone number because, like I said, all the windows had blown out. Her phone number is on the front seat of the car. And I'm like, that was weird because she leaves. So obviously she didn't want to get involved or she had witnessed and wanted to say, I've got somewhere else I've got to be, whatever. And I always thought that was really peculiar. And then there was a man in uniform who came over, and he reaches through the driver's side, and he goes and he turns off the ignition. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Obviously I can feel that he doesn't want the car to blow up. So at that moment, the drone that I have described to you suddenly begins to change. And it became what I have called to this day the music of the spheres, because I have no other name for it, because that's what it was. It was the most glorious, wonderful, and as someone who loves music and musical theater, and music is such an important frequency part of my life, there will never, ever, ever be the words to describe what I heard, because I didn't just hear it, I felt it, and I became it. So I can feel whatever I am at this stage beginning to change, and I'm morphing into something else. And this is when people discuss the tunnel of light. And you talked about that yesterday, Scott. For me, I was like here and here. I've always been kind of an overachiever. I've been so I just didn't do the tunnel. No, it literally was, I was in this plane in one moment, and then I was here the next. So if it happened, if I did see the tunnel, it happened so quickly that it's not part of my recollection. But what did stick with me was the change in tone. So now I've gone from this one monotone frequency to this symphony. So imagine landing in that space, right? You're freshly dead, you have no idea what's going on, and you're arriving in the most glorious thing you've ever heard in your life. So this is what it felt like. So I'm looking around, and the atmosphere that I'm sitting in, again, the colors, there are no words, I'm not even going to try. The colors, those sounds, that combination, what I was feeling, it was coursing through every fiber of whatever my being was at that time. And it was a sense of belonging. I can't say that I was like, oh, I'm home, because I didn't have that kind of awareness yet. Remember, like I said, I'm freshly dead. There is that moment of shock. And you're kind of sitting there going, okay, this isn't a bad experience. This is wonderful, but I'm not quite sure what's happening. And so I sat there, and the longer I sat there, the more aware I became. And so I am conscious that the atmosphere around me is moving. It was palpable. It pulsated. And it was a very comfortable feeling. There was no fear. There was no terror. But now here's what's interesting. As the daughter of that Southern Baptist minister who grew up in the Bible Belt, we weren't fire and brimstone. Dad was a motivational speaker, but, we had our hardcore beliefs. And so far, none of them have happened. Every single thing that I've been taught to believe that is going to occur when I die hasn't happened yet. So, I'm like, all right, I'm waiting for Jesus. And I'm looking around, and so far there's nobody there but me. And I'm looking around, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. And suddenly the atmosphere in front of me began to take shape. And again, like I said, this movie is, y'all are going to have to see it when it happens, because it's going to be a cracker. The atmosphere just begins to take shape, and out of the atmosphere come these two beings. And I say beings because they weren't angels. They didn't have wings. And they just hover there. And they were this beautiful, pearly sheen, kind of caramelly, that's the best I can do for you description. And they were part of the atmosphere. They took shape out of the atmosphere. They looked male, and I think that was totally for my benefit. And they were very older, fatherly type figures, and they were standing there, hovering, I guess. And I don't know about any of you in here, men, I'm sure it happens to you at some stage, but any women over 50, like myself, you're going through those moments where menopause is hit, and you should be able to remember a whole lot of things, right? Try being a doctor standing in front of a patient, and I'm like, yeah, that thingy? I've got no words. The words just leave. So this was very much that kind of situation where I know I'm supposed to know you. And they waited patiently. And nothing. I got nothing. And they waited patiently. And then all of a sudden, it was like a light bulb. And I was like, oh my God, you're my guardians. Oh, I have guardians. Oh yeah. And then the oh yes and the ahas began. And that is literally what the next, however long it was for me. Oh, I was so excited. and I'm remembering by the millisecond who I was, who I'd been, and it was just amazing. And so you have to recognize that in that moment, the little girl from the South who's, grew up with a very limited view on what happens is now exploding. And my entire paradigm is reinventing itself right in front of my eyes. And I'm like, whoa, oh my God, oh. And I was so excited. I wasn't sad because my view had been limited. I was so excited that it had been and that this was what really was. And so it was like the homecoming of all homecomings, and not because of the space, but because of the frequency exchange between myself and those individuals, that knowing. And notice there's still no dead grandmother. There's still no family members. Jesus is nowhere to be seen. And I sit in the space with these two individuals, and I just am. And it was magnificent. And I had always said from the time I was very small, because I was a very curious child, if you kind of haven't gotten that about me yet, and I was a little rambunctious, and I was very wordy. And I was the one with the hand who was always up, especially in Sunday school. What? They'd say, that totally doesn't make sense. It was the same way in school. And so I spent a lifetime questioning everything that had been thrown at me. And my parents, God love them, they were very patient. And they had to put up with a lot from me because I had been very unusual from the time I was born. But I'm sitting in that space now, and I'm like, oh, hang on a second. And I'm looking around, and as I'm looking for all of my conditioning from childhood to come to fruition, I'm like, where's the guy in the beard? Where's the judge? And there isn't one. And I'd always said, as that curious child, there better be a movie. That's all I'm asking for. When I get there better be a movie. Ask and you shall receive. And so my experience, and I know other people have experienced something similar, and I know people who haven't experienced this at all. My experience is I'm suddenly in this space, and it's like an IMAX cinema. And it's 360 degrees around me, and everything is happening simultaneously. This was wild. Remember, it's 1991. We don't have all the technology that we have today, so this is wow. And I'm like 10 years old over here while I'm simultaneously 18 over here, and I'm 16 driving a car, and I'm 12 years old going to a nursing home to sit with some old people. And it was magnificent. And the interesting thing was that I now had the capacity to feel everything that was happening in each of those moments all at the same time. You remember how, I don't know if any of you experienced when you were young and they'd tell you, God knows the number of every hair on your head. And you're like, really? You know how many heads of hair there are out there? I'm like, that always boggled my mind. But in this moment, you realize that you are God and you are that creator and that you've created this experience and you're fully aware of everything that's happening simultaneously right in front of you. And it's awesome. And so I'm watching this and it's happening all around me. Again, can you imagine this movie? The visual. It's all taking place around me. And that's my own life story, so I know what's coming. I just lived it. And there are some wonderful moments and some where I made such great choices, and there's some cringeworthy moments. But in that space, you're sitting and you're lovingly observing. And I'm like, oh, is this the judgment? I'm critiquing me. I'm critiquing my own performance here, and I actually kind of like what I've done so far. My work's been good. Even the bad stuff. I'm watching myself as a 17-year-old going off and leaving the nest at home and never having taken a drink and arriving to this college in this great college party, and I'm drinking vodka out of an IV bag. I've never even had a drink. So later in the night, and when I'm raped by two young men, I'm like, oh, I get that. And I'm totally accountable for my part in that. I'm not a victim here. I see what happened. But then I also see in that exact same moment this unfolding of thousands of people that I have been able to help with that story. And it was exploding all at once because not only am I seeing the 21 years that I have physically lived, I'm seeing what's to come. So that's when I suddenly realized, oh, I've already chosen to go back. Nobody forced me. Nobody even had a discussion with me. I made that choice. And I have a friend that I speak with, a wonderful fellow called Peter Bedard, and he had a near-death experience very similar to mine. And what's interesting and why we bounce really well off of one another is he was furious when he had to come back. And he spent many years trying to pull himself out of a very deep depression. And so I acknowledge and respect that what I experienced there is not what everybody experienced, but all I can do is share with you what happened to me. And I chose to come back here, and I like it here. There are an awful lot of people who are really distraught about planet Earth. I love this place. Because when you have that understanding of the dichotomy of dark and light and how necessary both are, and how beautiful that symphony is when it plays together, and your role in that, when you can see it that way, it makes this experience so much fun. I'm not homesick. I know what's waiting for me. So I don't pine away for trying to get back into that space because I know my time here is very limited. And I am going to do everything possible. I'm going to be used up, y'all. I'm going to be like this into the grave because I'm going to have done it all. And when I realized in that space that I was going to be going back, the guides that were there with me, they said, you've made this choice and you've always had the ability to communicate with people who are out of body. You've been visited many times in your life and you've had the prophetic dreams, but we're going to up the ante a little bit and make this a little bit fun for you. I said, bring it on. So suddenly I am told that there are going to be signposts and there are going to be guides along the way here. And that they're going to be letting me know the next step and the next step and the next step. And I'm to follow my gut. I've got to trust. And if I do that, if I believe in myself every single time, it's always going to work out. And so in doing that, they gifted me with the ability to place my hands on an individual, and it's like downloading a hard drive. So this is not something I had prior to the NDE. Yes, I had always known things before they happened. My mom would call me up when I was in college and go, just called to let you know a little news. And I'm like, what, Mrs. Jones died? And she's like, I hate when you do that, So that I'd had. But that was kind of the extent of how I was utilizing my gifts. And it took a car accident and a gigantic bang on the head at 21 years of age, a broken neck. It took that to shift me back on path. And guess who had set that up? Me. Imagine. That was another big, oh, yeah. If I had not taken the opportunity to utilize what I had come in with, I had set up this accident so that I would change my direction, change my course, and go this way. And guess what? I got to 21, and I had not utilized what I came in with. I was a cheerleader in college. Surprise. And I used to go and write down the scores of the basketball games, put them in an envelope, and stick them in my underwear drawer. I'd go off and I'd cheer at the game, and everybody came back to my room. We'd crack open a beer and open the envelope and go, this was me serving humanity. So I needed the car accident. And with this gift that I came back with of being able to touch somebody and download their hard drive, it was amazing and, a little bit daunting. So as Scott mentioned, my grandfather, who had been my companion since I was a child and dead since I was 1, by the way. That was an interesting talk at 5 years of age with my parents. Sweetheart, don't say that kind of thing out there because our friends know that your grandfather's dead. Please don't talk about that, okay. Because I was coming in, Judge and I went to do this and this and this. And they're like, you know what it means to be in a body and dead? You know what that means? And that was a fun conversation. But anyway, so Judge, my loving grandfather, who'd been a surgeon and medical doctor, by the way, he comes up and he suddenly announces to me, remember, I'm 6 months just out of college. And when I was driving away from that school, I looked in that rearview mirror and I waved bye-bye and I weren't going back. I was done. Education was finished for me. I'd done my time. And next thing, you got the dead grandfather coming in 6 months later after this life-changing near-death experience and going, hey, guess what? We're sending you to chiropractic school. I'm like, chiro what? Never even heard of it. Never even heard of it. I'm like, really? So that's not true, actually. I'd been to a chiropractor once when I was 18, when I was in college, and I was really hip, and I smoked, and I had a rib out of place because I was a rower. I swear, God, I'll never smoke another cigarette if I don't have lung cancer. And, of course, I went to the chiropractor, and he popped it back in. So that was my one experience with chiropractic. So now I find myself being told by this dead grandfather, who is the medical doctor, that you're going to be going to chiropractic school. And I'm like, why not medical school? And he's like, because it's a mechanistic philosophy. And what you're going to be doing, we need you to understand the tripod of the mind, the body, and the spirit. You remember, guys, I'm 21. I'm fresh out of the near-death experience. I have no idea what's going on. I'm mopping floors in a sign company. And now I'm going to go become a doctor? Like, are you kidding? And I'm like, okay, sure. So I remember picking up the phone and calling my parents and going, hey, guys. You remember, they're just digesting that I've had this horrific accident. And I'm like, I'm going to go to chiropractic school. And it's dead silent. And I can hear my father thinking, we're not paying for it. And so I was like, relax. I'm taking out student loans. I'll be doing this and all. And so all the while, as I get into chiropractic school, I realized why he wanted me there. Because I had license to touch multiple human beings, and it was legal. Chiropractor's job is wonderful because we get to feel people up all of the time, and we get paid for it. It's great. But the beauty of it, and the beauty of the school that I went to, was that this was a wonderfully vitalistic philosophy, and they were so brilliant at the education process. As much as the skill with the hands was important, so was the philosophy. And that understanding, that innate wisdom was something that was so deeply embedded in me. And talk about finding your tribe. I get there, and, you've got the freaky people and the ones who've been abducted, and you got the vegetarians, and you got all this. It was a whole new world. There were gay people. I'm from the South, remember? It was wonderful. It was wonderful. And so I'm feeling my tribe surround me, the people who think and feel and believe the way that I always had. And so I learned how to use this skill that I'd come back in with. And to this day, all these years later, what I do is I will sit with somebody, I can touch them, download their hard drive, bypass their BS, because we all have BS. And we all have these stories that we have sold ourselves about our experiences here. And I'm able to just wriggle right past that and go, hey, remember when you were 12 and blah, 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 blah happened? They're like, how do you know that? I'm like, that's what I do. And so I am able now to connect people up with frequency that will allow them to sit into a space and to recognize who and what they are. And they can bypass me. Because the last chapter in the book that I just finished is called Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is a tribute to the fact that I'm not a big fan of the gurus. I believe all of us are divine. I believe all of us are experiencers. Whether you remember it or you don't, if you're sitting in this room, you've been dead multiple times, whether it's here or on some other plane. And so I have dedicated my entire life to going around the world and talking to anybody who will listen to me. I'm not as polished as some speakers. I am not as eloquent as some writers. I am just me. I am a normal person who was driving down the road, and boom, my life changed in an instant. And if my message is to tell people, for God's sakes, live every moment where you are. Live with, my friends and my daughters were in our bedroom earlier, and I was on the phone speaking to somebody, and he was giving me a little bit of a sob story. I was like, dude, really? You have a choice. You do this or you do this. Which one is it going to be? And we spend so much of our time caught in that in-between space of well, as all these things have happened to me, and I'm this and I'm that. I'm like, once you've been through that experience and you come back in here with that memory of what you will be returning to and the doorway you'll be walking through into the next experience, none of that kind of stuff matters anymore. And the beautiful thing, and probably my favorite gift of all of it, believe it or not the being able to touch people and read their hard drive thing, is that I came back with a complete and genuine, I don't care what you think about me. It has been the most wonderful thing that has ever happened to me because it is freedom in a nutshell. And that doesn't mean that I don't love and respect you or the fact that you have experiences or opinions, because I do, and I'm a great listener, and I love that synergistic exchange with another human being. But the minute that thing starts happening where there's that power struggle, or there's that lesser than, greater than thing going on, or there's that you're placing some kind of judgment on me or my experience, my computer's off. I don't have it. I don't possess it. And it allows me to get up in front of people like you and tell this story from my heart. Because I couldn't care less if you believe it or not. I have a feeling, an inkling that probably most of you do because you're here, you know? But I just recently finished writing a book called Bringing Death to Life. And I think it's a pretty neat title. And let me tell you how that happened. It was called something else. It was called Death, the Next Great Adventure. And my closest friend is a wonderful author in Ireland called Tricia Scanlon. She's written 21 bestsellers. She's a popular fiction writer, and a magnificent author. But we we work in two different genres, but she's a deeply spiritual individual. And she had just lost her father. She'd lost her mother 10 years earlier, and she's got, I got a lot of questions. Let's write a book, and let's answer these questions, because if I've got them, there are a lot of other people who have them. And so it was Death, the Next Great Adventure, with the aim of answering questions about death for people so that people wouldn't fear it. There wouldn't be that kind of thing around it. And the Irish are wonderful. I love living in that country because we celebrate death there. We still do the wake, you know. Somebody dies, you walk into their house, there's the coffin sitting there, and Grandma is right there, and Uncle Joe's leaning up with his cup of tea against the coffin, and there's kids running in and out of the room. It's just normal. And it's so refreshing. It's not, death is big business over here and in other parts of the world. And I love that about the Irish, that they still have that capacity to celebrate. And so we're trying to bring that feeling. It's all about the feeling, all about that frequency. And so we wrote this book called Bringing Death to Life so that people could get that feeling and embrace what we have in Ireland, that we could try to recapture this and give people the gift of that feeling through letting go. And so I was charged with writing a chapter on religions and the perspectives about death. And so I titled it, Death Has No Religion, because it doesn't. And it was a wonderful exercise for me because I was able to go through and do a comparative study of all the world's major religions. And of course, what do we all know? They all have a belief in the afterlife, every one of them. That's not coincidental. It's because millions upon millions upon millions of people in this world have experienced something beyond who we are right now. And so this book is really exciting because of the fact that, it's what I would call a gateway book. It's not in depth as far as the personal experiences that I would have had, like that I've written in Promised by Heaven. But these are experiences that people have had on a more practical nature. And a beautiful part of this book for me is that my mom, who will be 90 this year, who's always wanted to be a published author, it was a lifelong dream, but she was my dad's wingman as he was the minister and the public speaker. And she wrote the chapter on losing a spouse. And so I'm going home tomorrow to pick her up in Virginia and fly her with me to Ireland, and she's going to be there and taking part in her very first book launch. And so it's very exciting. And so bringing death to life, it changed my father's death for her. As the wife of a minister, and, any of you who are familiar with the Christian religion, which probably most people in this room are, you know what our criteria are. You get it. And it's like in Ireland when you talk about, well, I'm a recovering Catholic. You hear that a lot. Or I'm a non-practicing Catholic, where people still affiliate or associate with a particular set of religious beliefs, but they don't actually believe them. Does anyone know anyone like that? Is anyone like that themselves? And so this has been a wonderful and magical experience for my mother in bringing death to life for her, because she shared something. I shared a story in the book that my mother and I simultaneously experienced. And it was my father, who was a lifelong minister, who had a certain set of beliefs about what happens when we die. And we know there is a heaven and there is a hell. And that's what Christians believe. And if you cut the mustard, as my dad said, you got to go this way. And if you didn't, you didn't go. Right? It's kind of it. So we're sitting in the nursing home, and my father is withering away with Alzheimer's. And it was a very, very difficult time for him. For me, one of the most beautiful experiences, to be able to sit with someone through their death process is such an honor. And one that I think, while I've been witness to and partaken in many healing sessions where we've been able to facilitate a change that saves somebody's life, I have to say that the whole Angel of Death gig is probably my favorite. Being allowed into someone's death process there's nothing like it. So here we sit, and my father, he's shuffling. He had sundowner syndrome, so he was constantly agitated, and he shuffled and he shuffled. And for a man who had spent his entire 60 years teaching about the love of God and what waits us on the other side, he was petrified of death. And I went, how weird is this? And thus another reason I wanted to write about bringing death to life, because that just didn't make sense to me. Where was it? His religion had failed him there. He'd failed himself there. He sat in utter terror. And I'm watching as his mind deteriorates. And we were sitting in that nursing home this particular night, and he'd already been in the hallway and done some embarrassing things, and he was violent and angry, and that wasn't him at all. And I'm getting to watch this human being, because now I have a great understanding, this is only 6 years ago, of what's actually going on. And I'm like, I don't feel sad or bad. Obviously, as his child, gosh, this is a tough one, but I get it. I'm watching him gather experiences that, because of the soul plan and life course that he had led, he would have never had. My father never said a curse word, ever. He never smoked. He never drank. He was a fitness nut, you know? So now I'm watching him get to experience angst and anger that he would have never in a million years expressed, because that's not what the soul plan and the person that he had chosen to become and the model that he had tried to emulate for the people that he taught, that was what he had chosen. And I'm like, rock on, Dad. He's angry. And he's like, the nurse would come in, darling, you'd be beautiful if you weren't a whale. And my mom would nearly pass out of the chair, and like, and he was like, go away from me, you hell. He didn't even know how to curse. So it was actually funny. It was really interesting watching it. But on this particular night, my father has shuffled. He's gone in, he's washed his hands. He had this OCD thing going on, and he would not go and lie flat on the bed. Because when he was still able to speak, which had been months earlier, because he was now just a mumbler, he had said, if I lie down flat, I'm going to die. So we knew he was terrified, and he slept sitting up in a chair. I'm like, this is so weird. You spent your whole life dedicated to a religion that's meant to bring you peace and comfort and joy. What happened? I don't get it. So he's shuffling around, and my mom and I are exhausted. It's after 11, and he goes over, and he climbs into the bed. And we're like, huh? And my mom looks at me, and her eyes are like this, and I'm like, it's cold. And he gets into the bed, and he's giddy, and he's laughing. Now remember, the man hasn't spoken a word in months. And he's reaching up, and my mom's like, oh no, is this it? And I was like, no, because one of the things that I have always possessed is the ability to see the auric field around all things. And so, interestingly enough, you might think that the light in someone's field will dim down when they're getting ready to pass. Exactly the opposite. It looks like a fireworks display. It's beautiful. And if I see multiple people with that beautiful display getting on an airplane, I take another flight, right? And have. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, there's no fireworks. I think we're okay. I think he's just having an experience. And so I'm like, Dad, are you okay? Yeah. And he's speaking. And he's like, I can see it. He's crystal clear. Now remember, we haven't heard him speak, and he was a beautiful orator with that fabulous Southern accent, When people would call to listen to our answering machine. This is Dick Hensley. Please leave your name and number. We haven't heard him speak in ages. And now there he is, and he's like, I can see it. And I'm like, what do you see? I know what he's seeing. Been there. And he's like, the land beyond the river. And I was like, ooh, great book title, which became my third book. And he's like, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And my mom is just like over here. And I was like, this is amazing. And I said, well, tell us about it, Dad. What does it look like? And he pats me. He said, Sugar, it's more beautiful than anything you've ever written about. He had a great sense of humor, and it was so wonderful to see it back. And it was funny because months earlier when he was still able to speak, I have to slip this in and tell you this. I had come over from Ireland, and I was visiting and going and sitting with him in the nursing home. And he said he was really at that point of losing the memory at that stage. And I said, not recognizing, it was hit or miss. And so I happened to go in at this particular time, and he hadn't known my sister, and he didn't know my mom. And I was like, Dad, look at me. Dad, do you remember me? You're Mary Helen Hensley, born February 23rd, 1969, and you have categorically rejected every adult male relationship you've ever come across. Yes, it's me! That's exactly what he said. So it was wonderful to hear him speak again. And so he's telling us, it's beautiful, it's beautiful. I said, well, who do you see? What's going on? And he goes, Mama, I see Mama. She's so young. And he's you can see he's somewhere else. He's relishing in that moment. And we're just agape, right? And so all of a sudden he turns and he looks and he goes, oh my gosh. And I said, what's wrong, Dad? And he goes, Daddy's there. And my mom looked at me and she did the double take because my father had been 100% convinced based on the criteria of his religious beliefs that his father had not made it to the land beyond the river. He was a gambler, had a bit of fun, He was out, and according to my father's very strict rules and what religion said allowed you in or did not, my grandfather had not made it. And so there he sits looking at him. And his eyes are as big as saucers. And he turns to my mom, and of all the most beautiful and wonderful and profound things that I have experienced as an experiencer, as a doctor, as a healer, as an author, as a speaker, this single moment stands out to me as one of the highlights of my life. And my dad, at 85 years of age, so deeply ensconced in his religious beliefs and so sure about what happens to us when we die, turns to my mother and he said, Helen, I've had it wrong all along. Everybody gets to go. You can't mess this thing up. Just like that. And I just sat there, and as I think of it now, it just gives me chills all over. Just think, so does that mean does that negate his entire life experience? Absolutely not. It served a purpose. He needed that structure at that point, but boom, right before he left, buddy, he got it. And it was the most amazing and awe-inspiring and humbling thing to witness. And he didn't have to die to do it, because he died 6 months after that. This was a moment. This was a moment that he had. Now, he never spoke again. But in that moment, we got to experience that with him, and it was beautiful. And I thought, how profound. And so I'm looking there at my mother, and he's just declared that everybody gets to go. Totally not a Christian concept, right? And I'm like, yes, because that's exactly what I experienced. And I'm looking at my mom, and she's these beautiful green eyes, and they're all teary. And she's, we're sitting in this beautiful sanctified moment. And she looks at me, and she goes, write that down. That'll be good in a book. I was like, yes. And so I've continued to share that story because to me it is the most beautiful thing I have ever witnessed. And, well, in this body anyway. And so as we wrote this book, Bringing Death to Life, I was like, I need to be able to find a way to impart that feeling to people, right? Because as many of the experiencers who've spoken this weekend have said, we all know, the whole point of what we do, what we've been charged with, is to try to give to you the same feeling, the same knowledge that we experienced without you having to die, right? We've heard multiple people say that, and that's true. It's what we signed up for. I willingly and lovingly agreed to come back in here and spend the rest of my life beating that drum, shouting from the rooftops. There are people who won't believe and who won't listen, and the beauty is, I don't care, right? But there are a whole lot of people who stand at the precipice just waiting to jump, and that we're able to assist them through and to bring death to life for them. Because as soon as they drop that fear, they are able to live their best lives with what they have right in front of them. I have become so much more loving and forgiving of myself. Like, we have had a ball traveling up the west coast of America. And I've put on probably 10, 15 pounds, and I love it because I ordered an expandable meat suit when I was there. You know, I've been on the road. I looked at this morning, and I was, oh my gosh, I'm going to stand in front of everybody. Look at those roots. Woo! And I went, you know what that means? I was having so much fun, I didn't have time to go to the hairdresser. Your attitude towards things completely changes. You open a light bill, and you're like, yeah, I'll pay that. I use the electricity. It's not, oh gosh, poor me. And so you find that through the generation of frequency and expectation that these wonderful things happen. And suddenly life becomes death, death becomes life, and it's all the same thing. That you realize we're all just beautiful little points on the same beam of light. And when you have that deep connection and understanding of that, you get this synergistic exchange with the world around you. And I don't know how I am with time. How am I? Oh, yep, 8 minutes. Let me share with you something that happened to us on the way up here. And this was magnificent. And this is a classic example of living in that zone, of having touched that space, that frequency, and being able to come back in here with that kind of knowing and understanding. You're creating every bit of this as you go along. And, if I have to say there was one challenge, sometimes I have to feign, not interest so much, but if it's a situation that requires me to be very, very upset, I'm a good actress. As my children will tell you, sometimes they're like, really? Other people's parents get upset about this kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, it's really hard. It's really hard for me to do that when I know what happens. Other than that, it's been wonderful. But I was so delighted that my children got to witness this as well, because here we were sitting in San Francisco because they'd never seen San Francisco, and I wanted them to see it. And we're right in city center, and it was not on our plan to do anything but continue driving north. We drove from Los Angeles to here in 3 days. And so we're sitting in city center, and we're right across from the train station, and I suddenly got, the voice. I'm as schizophrenic as they come with the voices. And the voice is like, you need to get to the Redwoods. And it wasn't on our trip, not this time. It wasn't planned, whatever. And I was like, well, I don't know where that is or whatever. You need to go to the woods. Okay, I'm going to the woods. I know better than not answer that voice. So I said to my friend, Angelica, who was traveling with us, I said, do you know where the Redwoods are near here? So she Googles it up, and she's like, oh, Muir Woods is close by. We need to go. And she was like, well, really? We need to go. And she's like, rock on, let's go. So off we drive. It's already after 6 o'clock. By the time we get to the woods and we check in, it's 7:15. The park closes at 8 o'clock. So it's now dusk, which is a really neat time to look at giant redwoods, by the way. The lighting is spectacular. But we're the last people into the park. And so we're walking through this park, and we do the loop, and we're in awe, and we're taking our photographs, and we walk past this last little turnoff, which is called Canopy Trail. And we have a little ways to go to get back to the front, where they have told us, we're leaving at 7:30. You can stay. Park closes at 8. The gate closes. Fabulous. So we're on our way back, and I had kind of dropped back because I was doing the gratitude walk. Thank you, thank you, thank you, which I do all the time because I actually really like being here, and I'm really grateful for it. And so I remember to say thank you every single day. And I'm thanking myself because I'm the one who got me back here. Thank you. Oh, man, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm in the woods. I'm breathing in that fresh air and the oxygen and those giant trees, and I'm like, thank you, thank you, thank you. My daughter, Jada, was concerned because I had dropped back and she couldn't see me. It was getting dark. And she yells out, Mom, are you okay? And next thing we hear, you know how you can whistle with 2 fingers? I can't do it, so I'm not going to. Help! And I'm like, somebody heard her yell. And so it happens again. And it happens again and again, 5 or 6 times. And I'm like, okay, this is getting weird. And my other daughter, who has a wonderfully vivid, fantastic imagination, she goes, this is the perfect setting for a murder. This is the kid who listens to the podcasts about the serial killers because she wants to be a criminal psychologist. And I'm like, that's been really fun for the last couple of years, guys. And she was like, oh my gosh, it's pitch dark. And I'm like, if I hear a chainsaw, man, I am out of here. And so I was like, did you guys hear that? And they said, yes. And so we went running up to the front. Well, of course, as promised, the people who were at the ticket booth and all, they were all gone. So it is now pitch dark. The toilets have been locked up, and this is locked up. There's no lights. And we're kind of standing there going, I know I heard somebody calling for help. We all heard it. And so there's one little cafe that's up here, and one guy is working in it. And my daughter and I walked up to the door, and I'm banging on the door, and he came, and he's looking at me like, what? We're closed. And I'm like, I know. You need to call the police. There's somebody stuck out here. He was very uninterested. And I was like, it's the coyotes. People think this all the time. And I'm like, well, okay, yes, we live in Ireland, and no, we don't have coyotes. But I have heard coyotes, and they sound more like babies screaming. And I'm like, this isn't a coyote. And so we walk back down, and I'm like, he's not going to call anybody. He thinks I'm nuts. And we go back down to the car, and we're like standing there, whatever. And all of a sudden, these lights come around the corner. And now my daughter goes, oh my gosh, it's the police. This is totally the setup for a murder scene right here. And it's a female policeman. She comes out, and the light's spinning, and here 5 girls standing alone in the giant redwood forest. Totally the setup for a murder mystery, right? And she's taking detail, and she's like, are you sure you heard this? Yeah. And her radio is going, she has poor reception. There's no cell reception out there. And you're like, missing. And we're like, oh my God. So I'm like, could you call for backup? So she calls for backup, and Officer James arrives. Lovely fella, cute as he could be. And he's like, okay, what's going on here? And I said, somebody's out there. Somebody's lost. Something's happening, and we're not leaving. Well, how'd you get here in the first place? A voice in San Francisco told me. And she goes, cool. And I was like, thank you. And so he's like, okay, so the voice from San Francisco told you guys to come to the woods. Mm-hmm. And your daughter called out your name, and you think that triggered somebody else. Mm-hmm. And he's like, you actually think there's someone out there? I know there's someone out there. Okay. So he puts on the big backpack, and now the call is coming in. We have a report of a missing woman who's been missing for 5 hours. And I was like, bingo. So off we all go. Can you imagine? So here's the 2 police officers, one in the front with the backpack. There's my daughters, my friend Angelica, and myself. We're Trace. I have on flip-flops, for God's sakes, right? And I'm hiking up these things, and we are legging it. And he is booking down. And I'm like, slow down, man. She's been out there 5 hours, 5 more minutes, And we're like booking it up there. And the female officer Knight was behind us, and we're all in the middle. And like, you couldn't make it up. And I love this stuff. I write books. I'm like, this is great stuff, fodder for the next book. And so we're walking up the trails, and we're yelling, and we're hearing this faint little voice. So hadn't it turned out that this lady had gone out for an hour's walk, and her friends have now reported her missing 5 hours later. And she'd gotten lost, and because there's no cell reception out in the great redwood trees, she was stepping around trying to get a signal, and she stepped back, the ground gave way, and she tumbled down into a ravine. She had no water. She was badly scraped up, but she had not hit her head, thank goodness. And so we arrive around the corner, and he's got his headlamp on to see this woman standing clung to a tree. There are coyotes, like I said, couldn't make it up. There's coyotes screaming. There's all sorts of things going on, and there she is, clung to the tree, and she's now, I can't believe you came. And I'm like, we heard you. I know you heard my daughter yell out. And she goes, no, I didn't hear your daughter. I was like, well, we heard you. So long story short, get her all sorted out, and here we are. She's got me by one hand and my daughter by the other hand, and my friend's doing Reiki on her back down the woods, and the police officers are just like all in their stride. It's all good. So funny. And we get down towards the bottom, and she's kind of coming out of shock, and she was like, "Where did you say you were from?" And I was like, "Oh, we're from Ireland." And she goes, "I just moved back from there." Really? I think I let some explicative fly at that stage, which was suitable for the occasion. She's like, "Yeah, I went there, and it was so magical. I was traveling for 6 months, and I got stuck there for 3 months and absolutely loved it. And I've just come back, and this is the first time I've ever been on this trail." Bringing death to life, folks. When you've been in that space and when you continue to touch that frequency, which is available to each and every one of us, those are the magical moments that can happen in your life all the way through. And some people are like, "Well, it's well for some. You've been talking to the dead and doing this." I bet there's some of you in here who are really good at cooking. Anybody? I am not. I'm a horrible cook. My children will tell you. But this I do every single day, and I'm really good at it because I practice. And all I'm saying to you is that in order to bring the gifts of death to life, you don't have to die first. But you have to be willing to practice that every single day, which is that open and honest and caring and loving belief that we are all omnipotent and divine, wonderful beings who are here having the experience, and that you're dictating everything that happens along the way. And so in order to have that magical and mystical and miraculous type of experience that I've just described there, all you have to do is go, "I expect nothing less. I expect nothing less than the miraculous." And that's really been a wonderful blessing in my life. And so to have died and to be able to come back here and look at your faces and to be able to say, "Thank you so much for what you're doing," because we're all just fractals of the same one. So I appreciate you and you and you and you and what you're doing. And I thank you for allowing me to do what I do because it brings me such great joy. And if I could let one person off the hook in here, anyone who might have been questioning, is it real? Oh God, it is real. Boy, is it real, and boy, is it wonderful. But guess what? So is here. So be in it and be of it and know that that wonderfulness waits for you. But don't be looking for that so much that you forget what's right in front of you here. And I'll spend the rest of my days telling that same story. So I thank you